I've been trying to cast my mind back to think about occasions when I've been brought to tears by royal ceremony. Seldom happens, but it does. I'm a sentimental fool, but not that sentimental. However, one thing that always stirs me is God Save the Queen, when Her Majesty is in attendance. So that will always bring tears to my eyes, especially the fanfare. It's the fanfare beforehand that gets me and stirs such pride in me. It really does. Actually, let's listen to it, shall we? Honestly, in all seriousness, it gets me every time, right under the left tit. And I remember especially at the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, 10 years ago now, just as Prince Charles gave the speech for his mother, with all the celebrities gathered on the stage, and then it goes into God Save the Queen. It's all on YouTube, of course, which is what YouTube is so good for. Another time I cried, I don't remember crying at Catherine and William's wedding, but I actually cried when Meghan walked the aisle. Yes, because like many of you, I had high hopes for that marriage, and I had nothing against the girl whatsoever. Was happy to embrace the day and embrace her into the family, as everyone in the United Kingdom was, and I thought it was a beautiful moment when she walked down the aisle. We now discovered that she had asked Prince Charles not to join her at that first section when she walks down the aisle, and that she had suggested he join her halfway down because apparently she wanted her own moment in the limelight. Well, she got it, and I was a sucker for it. I cried then. And I cried yesterday. I was so taken aback and so taken by surprise at that moment when Her Majesty appeared out of nowhere with the Duke of York on her arm. I know this is going to be controversial. I know that many of you will not be in agreement with me at all, but that was one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful, acts of her reign that I've witnessed. It was the act of our Queen and a mother saying to the world that her son is no monster, despite what anybody thinks about him or what anybody claims that he's done. He still hasn't been found guilty of any crime. He still hasn't been accused of any crime. And you would think from the outcry in the tabloid media that he's Myra Hindley, and that his dalliances, however foolish, however unadvised, however shameful, are on a par with the Hindleys of this world. You really would think that he's that much of a monster for apparently, allegedly, sleeping with a girl over the age of consent who appeared to be willing at the time. But we won't go into that now. That's for you to decide. You know, it is what it is. But my breath honestly was taken away in that moment. And the Queen went way up in my estimation even. As highly regarded as she already was in my own mind, it went up. Because there's no doubt in my mind that that moment was a big fuck you to the rest of the world. She's the Queen, and just because he's said to be her favourite son, I mean, I don't believe all of that claptrap, but just because she's his mother and he is her son, I don't believe for one moment that means that she's some sap or some sop that kowtows to his every want and whim and pampers him so. That's not Her Majesty at all. Judy James, who often speaks on body language matters, told the Daily Mirror that the Queen performed one of the most controversial body language gestures of her entire reign today, when, after walking up the aisle with her hand linked into his arm, she posed in front of the eyes of the world to smile and nod in thanks to her second son, Andrew, before taking a seat at her husband's memorial service. And I can quite understand how Princess Beatrice broke down with the emotion of it all, shielding her visage with the Order of Service. You see, this is why fans need a resurgence, my dear, for moments like that, when you can, protect your emotions from the rest of the world, have some privacy. Well, she used her Order of Service, and wow, poor girl, she knows he's no monster. Now, none of us can say why the Queen did this, because there have been whispers that the Duke of York pestered her into it, that he backed her into a corner because it was the first public appearance of his since his entire episode of so-called disgrace. So I rang up two chums of mine with associations to Windsor. I've spoken about one or two of them before, I think, in the past, because I thought you might want their insight. Well, to be quite honest, they don't have any insight on this issue, because it is a private matter between the Queen and Andrew. One, the very gossipy one, suggested to me... This particular one has spoken to me privately about what considers to be the Queen's medications taking effect on some of her decisions over the last year. And obviously this is all just complete heresy. Please just take it with a pinch of salt, as I do. They seem under the impression that certain pain medications for her back issue are, should we say, fudging some of her usual clarity when it comes to taking decisions. But make of that what you will. But the other one of this pair, who's a more serious person altogether, again, this can only be conjecture, but it's their inclination to believe that this was nothing other than a powerful moment of intent from Her Majesty, that she absolutely wanted, knowing how controversial it would be, to show the world that she approves of her son despite what they think, and that he has her blessing. Make no qualms about it. Her Majesty might be in her dotage and becoming frail, but she's still the full ticket. She still reads all of the papers every day, so she knows exactly what the world thinks of her son. She had to take the step and do her duty of stripping that son of all his honours after, he's 60 years of age and has been Duke of York for much of that time. And she took the step, because of duty, to strip him of those honours, or he handed them back by mutual agreement, however way you want to put it. But this was her moment, in her dotage, while we don't know how much time is left, for her to make a very powerful statement. And I'm glad she did. And it was actually suggested to me that it was only at the very last minute that Her Majesty sprung it on Prince Andrew. And that originally there was talk of her being led down the aisle by the Dean of Westminster. That's who had been penciled in, or who rumour had it was going to be doing the job. But she sprang it on Andrew. And that's one of the reasons why Beatrice was so taken aback and so touched by the gesture. Now, let's talk about what's really important, the clothes. And of course, Edinburgh green was the colour of the day. This fur that I'm wearing is actually a dark green, but I know that it's probably going to read much darker on screen, so I'm sorry if you can't see, but I am wearing green to pay tribute, including the brooch. I'm sure you can probably see that. A little bit of green. Green used to be one of my favourite colours, but as I said the other day, it is difficult to wear, and I've gone off green a little bit. I mean, I love it obviously in nature, but in clothing, I don't know. And actually seeing them all together in their greens, which pays tribute to Prince Philip's official colour for his livery, for his staff, for, I think, his cars, his transportation, all that kind of thing, including, I think, the Land Rover at his funeral, which was his hearse. They're all decorated in green. It was one of his favourite colours, I think. So that's why the senior members, Anne, Camilla, the Queen, etc., were in green. Queen looked lovely, of course, as she always does. Some people have noted a little bit fuller in the face than she had done over a few months previous, so that's encouraging news, isn't it? But yes, when you see them all together, I mean, it put me in mind a little bit of Nottingham Forest, these creatures emerging, you know, Robin of Sherwood. Especially Camilla, with that giant feather in her hair there. It was almost like a quill that she could pull out, or one was expecting her to pull a bow and arrow off of her back or something out of somewhere. But she looked very nice, I've got to say. Princess Anne was the best dressed for me. She looked great. She looked really chic, especially with that lovely bright red lipstick and nothing else. I rather love the severity of her look, which is, you know, the wiry grey hair in an updo, bare face for all intents and purposes, but with that splash of colour on the lips. That crimson blotch. Nice. And the cut of the green garment she was wearing was very nice. Gorgeous pump she was wearing. Very nice, almost a kitten heel sort of affair. And the hat was discreet. Keep the hat a little bit discreet, you know, and she managed to do that with that gorgeous dash of lippy. I hated Catherine's gown. There, I said it. I didn't like it at all. Especially from a distance in the photographs. When I saw some of the more close-up ones, I could see the beauty of it, I could see the fine quality of it, and she looked absolutely exquisite. I mean, that gorgeous complexion, the pearls that bring out the luster in her skin tones. Really, really lovely. But when you have the world's wardrobe at your fingertips, I didn't like it, that polka dot affair, and I don't think the colours did much for her. Black does very little for people unless they're teenagers. I tried to avoid it other than in the evening. In the evening I always wear all black, just with my shock of blonde hair, or sometimes midnight blue, but the kind of midnight blue that's so dark that it looks blacker than black under electric light. But other than evenings, I think only teenagers really look great in black, unless you've got a particular style, or you're a goth or something, or with very dramatic colouring, or very black hair, and pale skin, or if you're a person of colour, then you can get away with it much more than white folk. But no, I don't think it did anything for her. And that hat, I hated the hat. It looked like a wicker basket to me with a sort of piece of tumbleweed sprinkled onto it. What was that on the front of her hat? It looked like someone had scooped out the dust bunnies from under her bed and just dumped them on top. I thought it was horrible. Sorry, I'm just reading in my notes that actually that polka dot dress was navy blue of Catherine's, so my mistake there. But that's what it read in the photographs, I'm afraid, a sort of dullish black. She's mastered the art of the window peak, hasn't she, in her hat that we saw at Prince Philip's funeral, where that iconic photo of her was taken. But that's one of her iconic vantage points, isn't it? That's become a trademark of Catherine's. And trademarks are good. They're always very handy for branding purposes. So that was lovely to see. Little George and Charlotte, very different characters, aren't they? And you can tell already, you know, these personalities get etched onto the faces and the expressions of the little children, don't they? At such young ages. They really do. They're already there. You can see more or less who they're going to be already. Slight hints of reluctance from little George, or bashfulness. I can't quite put my finger on the word, but maybe a wariness of the burden facing him in the future. The face is always... a bit like this. Bless him. And Charlotte, in contrast, those alert, sort of ferocious eyes. I bet she's a handful. She can either go one way or the other, can't she? Let's hope that the wokies never get hold of her, because if they do, then we've got another Harry on our hands in her, I think. But if she, if she follows her mother's wonderful, exemplary example, then she'll be a very strong asset to the crown in the other direction, which is exactly what we need with these young ones coming up. And I'm sure she's in safe hands, because she's under the tutelage of classy parents. Beatrice and Eugenie. Those two. What can I say? Princess Beatrice looked like she was wearing a sack of charcoal, as far as I'm concerned. And she almost got it right with the shoes, because she'd matched them with the hat. Lovely plum-coloured affair, lovely colour, but why with the ankle straps? They always have these hideous accoutrements, because that just shortens her legs. And she's got nice legs, she's got a nice figure. She's actually a real rave. Both of those York girls are in real life, you know. They are a real rave, well, especially Beatrice, with the ghostly eyes. They can look a bit spooky on camera, but in the flesh, she's a rave. She really is. But, you know, I've come to draw affection out of the fact that they always wear the most ugly clothes. She wore a sack of charcoal. Eugenie, awful. Of all the clothes in the world, she chooses that sort of, it looked like a pleated number there with the sort of abstract florals. Looked like something from off the shelf at C&A or BHS, which for those abroad, these are British department stores of yesteryear. I ask, and that matinee cape that she wears, the hairband, oh darling Eugenie. They are their mother's daughters in many ways. They truly are. Loved seeing the Kents. Loved seeing the Kents. Marie Christine, Princess Michael of Kent. I can't help but love her. She looked fine, and her husband, I would absolutely let him have his way with me. I really would. I don't care if he's geriatric. I would absolutely. He is such a handsome man. He really is. But I always love seeing those. I love seeing the extended royals. I've definitely come to the conclusion I don't want a slimmed down monarchy. The more the merrier. We need these characters. I don't care what public opinions say. It's true to say that Andrew's home, Royal Lodge, is only a few miles, I think 3 miles from Windsor Castle. So people said that it was for convenience that they travelled together. Well, you know, they're the royal family. I'm sure they can hire 2 cars. People also forget, you see, this was another reason that Her Majesty would have wanted Andrew taking her arm, because of 2 reasons relating to his name and his title. Her Majesty's father was the Duke of York, you see. So that dukedom is important to her. But also, Prince Philip's father's name was Andrew of Greece. So it's his namesake. So you see, these threads are very special and run through with meaning. And of course, another way that Prince Andrew was protected is by the lack of military uniforms that were worn. Because one would expect for Prince Philip for military uniforms to be worn, I think. But there would have been an outcry, of course, if Andrew had worn his uniform as Vice Admiral after being stripped of all his associations. So to spare his blushes, it seems that it was decided that if he can't wear his uniform, then none of them should, which seemed to be the right mood. And if Her Majesty was in pain, she didn't show it. She looked very sorrowful. I know people have said that her eyes were moist and that she cried. To me, it looked more like the reflection of light in her eyes, but I'm sure she was holding back her emotions. But if she was in pain, she seemed to disguise it from us. I really hope she's not in a great deal of pain, or hope those meds kick in while she has to sit there, and she stood as well on a number of occasions during the service. I thought it was great that the service was fairly short at 45 minutes. That's just the right length, and I do hope that a lot of these, although I love pomp and circumstance, some of these proceedings and ceremonies do go on and on and on, and you think, oh, do I really have to sit through it all? So I quite liked that. Let's keep these things succinct. And though Andrew's presence was felt at the ceremony, you know, he was excluded from any postings on social media, etc., because he's not an official working royal now. So that's all right and good. But for my money, the star of the whole service, Doyin Sonibare. She was the first to speak, I think from memory. She was the first to speak, and she spoke at length, so eloquently and so powerfully about the Duke of Edinburgh, because she wanted to thank him for the opportunities that she had been able to acquire from participating in the Duke of Edinburgh scheme. She is the winner of a bronze, silver and gold medal. She's now she's doing a PhD in sickle cell research, but she's gone on to have a fabulous career, and she credits the Duke of Edinburgh scheme with giving her the skills, the confidence, the experience to go forth in life and have a fruitful experience.
For me, the Duke of Edinburgh's award helped to open new opportunities for me. I spoke about it in my tribute, but I wouldn't have gotten my first job at 18 if it wasn't for the Duke of Edinburgh's award. I thought it was an honour, especially as a way of thanking the Duke, because I don't think I ever got to thank him in person, but just to share his legacy and his story to the world, but also to show how it's impacting millions of young people. I just found that an honour, and I'm really glad that I was able to give the tribute today.
She mentioned all the lives that he's touched, people that she knows and she's met through the scheme, but also the millions that she hasn't, because we're talking 7 million young men and women over 6.5 decades, including about 3 million of them who actually won awards. And it's offered in over 140 countries as well. So, when you look at this mood of the last few years, what have the royals ever done for people? These people are so lazy. They haven't done even the slightest bit of investigation into what they do every day. And you can see the fruit of that with people like Doyin. And it got me to thinking, I think I might call this video, just to piss people off, the woman that Prince Harry should have married. I don't mean necessarily that she would have been the right woman for him. You have to have chemistry and attraction and all the rest of it. Because she is an example of a woman who is royal. She channels the royal spirit. Her beauty shines to me. I don't want to go over the top, but it's just drawing, I couldn't help, I'm afraid, but draw a comparison between the likes of Doyin, a true queen, and the likes of Meghan, an aspiring queen. Because, one of the last times that I had cried before I cried yesterday at that service was when Meghan walked up the aisle, and when we all had high hopes for her, and we were so thrilled to see the new twist she was going to bring to the royal family, a little bit more diversity in there, and wow, how healthy it would have been for her to be an ambassador for the Commonwealth. Went into it filled with joy at the prospect of having this great honour bestowed upon her and the opportunity she had. And you think, wow, someone like Doyin, can you imagine if Harry had met her? And what a wonderful opportunity that would have been. Somebody with her attributes, somebody real, not just somebody who lays it on thick for the cameras and is seeking all kinds of adulation. Somebody real, and somebody who could have just got on board with enthusiasm and said, wow, I've got this fantastic opportunity to represent the Queen of the world, my dears, and make my own mark and contribution by helping people all across the Commonwealth and being an ambassador. What a missed opportunity. A young woman who has respect for the institution, for the monarchy. And as you know, I've had so many hundreds, if not thousands, of comments from my beloved viewers in the Bahamas, Belize, West Indies, especially over the last month. And it would have been such a delight for them to see a beautiful, strong woman of colour embrace the position that she had been given and done something constructive with it, rather than paddle off over the pond, start making Netflix programmes and have chats with Oprah. She really set a marvellous tone for the ceremony, and I thought she was very royal. Would have made a fabulous Duchess. Oh, see, it's just led me off into fantasy world. She's too good for Prince Harry, to be honest, and she's too good looking for him, in my opinion. She would have way outshined him. But in my fantasy world, she would have just made such a fucking fabulous Duchess. Why couldn't it have been you, Doyin, instead of that brazen hag? I also wanted to take a moment to pay my personal respects to someone who might have gone under your radar, but whose work you will have known, and that is Tony Walton, who was a set and costume designer, Oscar winner, and ex-husband of Julie Andrews. He's the father of her daughter Emma. He's in his 80s, led a fabulous long life. But I've mentioned him before on the show because, as you know, I have a love of colour, and I've spoken before about how I was influenced by a DVD I saw of Julie Andrews speaking about well, she did a voiceover for Mary Poppins on a DVD, and she spoke about how Tony Walton worked on Mary Poppins, did the set and the clothes together with her, worked on it together with her, and he always had a splash of red in all of his movies. He had an obsession with having just a little splash of red in the frame because it gave a warmth to things. You can see it all throughout Mary Poppins, you know, the red corset in Jolly Holiday, the red cherries in the hat, it's everywhere. And I've spoken before about how I keep a little bit of it here in the lamplight, the reflection, a little red in the cushion. I'll usually have a bit of red, not always, but you know, I tried to pay that little homage. So I've just always carried that with me. You know how little things reach your heart? Well, I always carried that moment with me because I have a love of Julie Andrews. I was thinking about her as well, because when the Queen drops off this mortal coil, of course that'll never happen, but when she does, it'll feel like Julie Andrews is the only surviving Queen we have left, doesn't it? Because a lot of people think of her as the Queen as well. And it's quite strange because she's so sort of American now. We don't see her in England much at all. Once she went, but in another way she's thought of as so very quintessentially English. So it's quite a strange thing, but of course she is beyond fabulous, and I'm sure has touched many of your lives with her work as she's touched mine. And I didn't realise this until I read his obituary, but they met when they were 11 and 12 years old. He had gone to watch her play an egg in Humpty Dumpty. I think she was already playing the West End by then. There's footage of her on YouTube singing at a very, very young age. I think like 8 or 9. I think she sang for the King or the Queen. Someone royal anyway when she was young. And then after the show, he and his brother found himself on the same train as Julie Andrews. They couldn't believe it, so I think they got chatting when they got off at the station at Walton-on-Thames, because she was obviously still living here in England where she was raised. And they went on to have a friendship and a courtship and eventually married. Didn't last a hell of a long time, but they produced a daughter, and they always remained fantastic friends. It was one of those very happy divorces like the Yorks. But a different scenario. She always spoke so highly of him, which is lovely. I always got the impression that he was gay, which of course he wasn't, but you know, stereotypes exist, and you think set and wardrobe designer, happy divorce, all this kind of thing, but that's his own affair. But Walt Disney invited him to do that costume design for Mary Poppins. And actually that story, written by P.L. Travers, was originally set in the 1930s, which I guess sort of Depression era, but it was reimagined for the Edwardian era when it came to the film, because they thought it would be more beautiful, more interesting, more evocative, and it worked really well, didn't it, in the film? It's one of those, you know, it's a perfect film. It could not be bettered, as we saw with Mary Poppins 2. I don't know if you saw that. I actually didn't think it was a bad movie in and of itself, but it's quite something, isn't it, to approach the genius of the original movie and try and revisit. Not, you know, it was fine. It was a bit of fun, but not memorable in the same way. And Julie spoke of that experience during Mary Poppins. She said during the fittings he would show her where he had hidden little touches of primrose or coral in the linings of jackets, things like that. What's this lining? I've got quite a nice lining in this, you know. I should display to you. Oh, you're not going to be able to see it, are you? It's really nice. I managed to find this fur last week in a sale. It was originally £350, reduced to 80, because I like a bargain, you see. And this is the perfect time for to get your winter wardrobe, because everything's on sale from the winter and obviously coming into spring. So I managed to find But it is so lovely to wear. I mean, it'll be too hot to wear it soon, but it's really, really cosy. He said, I fancy that Mary Poppins has a secret life, a kind of quiet pleasure at being a little wicked and naughty. So I rather loved that, because I always loved that little glint in the eye. And I thought that about Mary Poppins too. I always thought she was way too good for Bert. But I think that's why she led him on a little bit, because he was never really going to get his chance with her, was he? She's far too good for him. That's why she had that little glint. She was getting it elsewhere. Yes, bless you, Tony Walton, and thank you for your good work. Let me know what you thought about the service. Did you shed a tear or two as well? I bet you did. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you in the next show, and I hope you have a beautiful day full of fun and adventure. If you'd like to treat me to a little cup of tea and a slice of cake, or if I made you chuckle, then my tip jar is in the description box below. But there's certainly no obligation to do that. You are free to just be a voyeur and watch and enjoy. Ta-ra!